Hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. My name's Lori. I'm in Tasmania. That's my name. I'm not sure it's coming up as Lori Taz, but that's my handle.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. My name's Lori. I'm in Tasmania.
Hang on, we're getting a bit of feedback.
I'm not sure it's coming up as Lori Taz, but that's my handle.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. My name's Lori. I'm in Tasmania.
Is this thing a bit going in a loop? Just a second, I'll see what I can do.
Lori Taz, but that's my handle.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Is this thing a bit going in a loop? Just a second, I'll see what I can do.
Hi,
Hi, how are you? Is this thing a bit going in a loop? Just a second, I'll see what I can do. Hi, how are you? I can see your computer with our voices going over and over again. Is that happening at your end?
Yeah, it's a feedback loop here.
I can see your computer with our voices going over and over again. Is that happening at your end?
Yeah, it's a feedback loop here.
I wonder if have you got headphones that might stop that, or I can put headphones in too.
Yeah,
I wonder if have you got headphones that might stop that, or I can put headphones in too.
Yeah, let me see what I've got. Yeah, let me see what I've got.
Also, you might have to mute the YouTube. Also, you might have to mute the YouTube. Also, you might have to mute the YouTube.
Okay, I've exited the YouTube.
Perfect. There we go.
There we go. Much better. Good, because I couldn't find any headphones.
No, that's okay. I'll just let you know, Laurie, that we often will just close off the camera. If you're fine with it on, that's fine. But if other people might want to be anonymous, so we usually just shut all the cameras off. But you're welcome either way. It's up to you.
Oh, I'm fine with the camera.
I'm quite enjoying seeing your little friend there. Is that a wallaby?
He's a patty melon.
Oh, patty melon.
I just got him a few days ago, and this is where they live when I first get them inside my shirt. It's very sartorial.
Yes, looks very cozy.
You don't want the cat? Okay, no cat. He doesn't have a name yet. I've only had him since Thursday. And,
okay.
You know, we kind of throw names at him and see what sticks.
Yeah. Do you look after, is it Injured Wildlife or something like that you?
Yeah, I'm part of the Wildlife Cares Network.
Oh, so
beautiful. Yeah, it's a volunteer thing, but I usually have at least one or two of the little guys.
Yeah. I'm just we've got people viewing the broadcast but not jumping on. So I'm just wondering if anyone's having any trouble getting on.
Well, like I said, this is the first time I've done it, and I'm kind of amazed. It was, it just clicked through, but
yeah.
Back loop. Yeah. Well, looks like we've got somebody else.
Oh, good. Hey. I'm switching between a couple of screens. Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. We've got another. I'm getting feedback. I don't know if it's because I've got something on. How's the sound and the video and everything? Is that all right for everybody?
It's clean at this end.
Yeah.
It's fine for me.
Excellent. I'm just wondering if anyone else is going to jump on, because we have, I think there's seven people viewing the live. We've only got 2 on, so if anyone's having any trouble getting on, please let me know. Otherwise, maybe it's just the 3 of us.
And your name is?
Well, that's the other reason. I'm just going by Aussie Radfems.
That's fine.
Yeah, we've got a few people that do the live streams, so we just keep it under our profile picture.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. We've got Kate Spell is on the chat saying she's a bit shy to jump on, but she's watching from the chat, so that's okay. Well, we may as well start. I've just been looking at what's been happening this week, and there's been a lot of language policing. And so if you notice under the stream there, I just popped a few topics down there, because we had the New South Wales hate speech law changes and the Victorian gender equality bill. I don't know if you said you're in Tasmania, Laurie, but have you heard anything about those? And
no, not really. I've been watching what's going on in the UK with the GRA and in Canada, and the laws that are very broad in terms of all of the things they're going to affect. He's been fairly quiet in that regard. The only thing that I've seen recently was that was in the news was I think a 15-year-old male who wanted to be able to start transitioning and having to essentially apply to the courts to do that, and wanting to change the laws so that they don't have to apply to the courts, that they legally can start that medical process at that age, or possibly even younger, depending on how things get rewritten. But other than that, I haven't heard much.
I think with the New South Wales hate speech laws, I think they were just adding in gender identity as another group. Just have a quick check. And the Victorian laws seem to be a bit different. It's more of a around workplace equality, gender equality in the workplace, which doesn't seem to go so much into anything that would help or hinder transgender folks. But there was definitely. Ash, have you heard much about these?
No, I'm just listening and learning from you. Yeah, I'm from the United States, and I heard about this from S Valley. I'm done the hangouts with Manchies, the Men Are the Problem hangouts.
Yes, they're really good.
So
I'm also from the U.S. originally. I've been living in Tasmania for 15 years now.
Okay.
American expat, as you can probably tell from the accent.
Yeah.
Yes, I do have a patty melt on my chest. For those of you wondering, this is a Patty Melon Joey. It's very interesting because there are multiple issues here. I was there in the 80s when the whole notion of hate speech was really embraced by the gay and lesbian community as a way of trying to make clear and in very simple terms speech that was being used to incite not so much hatred, but discrimination.
Yes.
And I really objected to it then, because without the analysis, without the structural analysis, without the looking at who's doing what to whom, the notion of hate speech, within about a year and a half, suddenly you had these, very right-wing Christian organizations saying that what gays and lesbians were saying to them was hate speech. So it was so easily co-opted because it's such a simplistic term. It was so easily co-opted to mean anything that sounds hateful to us as a group. And so you have this whole problem here in which hate speech has been liberated, if you will, from any structural analysis. So rather than saying this is a group that has power and this is a group that is able to affect their wants and desires and impose them on another group, and we're going to try and limit the speech of the powerful group to essentially protect those with less power. And so, I hate how things get dumbed down in an attempt to be intelligible to the average person. 70% of the population never gets past concrete thought into abstract thought. So you basically have us abstract thinkers going, well, how can I make this intelligible to people who aren't abstract thinkers? And somebody will come up with, well, we'll put it in these very simplistic terms. And it's like, that's fine until those simplistic terms get turned around on you, because they will.
Yes.
Once anything has cachet, it will be co-opted by the dominant culture.
That's a really interesting point that you, sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
I was just, that's a really interesting point you were making about hate speech. I never thought about that. And I think that's really interesting, but it's also interesting because woman has been co-opted, and it's like, how can you change that? You know what I mean? Like that already has a definition, yet they've co-opted that term. And I feel like, with post-structuralism and postmodernism, anything and everything is being co-opted, no matter, the simplicity of it or the complexity.
Well, everything's freed from material reality is what's happening in postmodernism. Is basically everything is a construct. Nothing is based in material reality. And, I've actually studied linguistics and semiotics, and, every word is a construct. They're abstract, everything, so we can't begin to talk about things unless we're willing to acknowledge that we're using constructs to reference something real. I'm sitting on a chair. The fact that I call it a chair and not a stool, goes back in English history to the Norman invasion. And I understand that on that level, but on the other hand, it's holding me up. It's what it does.
And this is what's happening in the UK with the sign that's been taken down, isn't it? This is a dictionary definition of woman. It's not a.
Well, basically, what's happening is that any assertion that we're making that says we own this, you can't have it, is immediately seen as inflammatory.
So this is tying in with the hate speech idea that
what's said in the UK is not that what's on the sign is wrong. It's factually correct. It's that it's inflammatory and hate speech directed at a minority population.
Yeah, it's the context and the meaning
and we are getting very close. Yeah, we're getting very close to thought crime. It's not the self, it's the intention as viewed by the other population, not by us. Not by us saying, we want to say, according to us, this is the valid definition of woman. What we're getting is, according to the people who are reading this, this is exclusionary of them and therefore bad.
Well, that's right. And this is what the man that wanted to have it taken down, who was representing the LGBT community, who wasn't trans himself, was even saying that there's nothing inherently wrong with the definition. It's just that it's, you know, his perception of why it was put there was what was offensive.
Right, exactly.
But if that's going to be legislated against, then I think it was a really good example of women have been looking at billboards that are incredibly sexist and offensive and misogynistic and all the things since billboards were ever made. So the fact that this can get taken down because one man had one opinion about what was inferred by a dictionary definition is absurd, because we can't get billboards taken down because women as a sex class is not a protected identity.
I would like the Deuce starring James Franco. I would like those billboards and posters be taken down.
Yes, there are so many. And they're not even like, there are a lot of just clothing advertisements that are really sexist and horrible. But there's no legal way that we can have them taken down, because women as a sex class are not protected.
Well, and again, this kind of goes back to what, I forget who wrote No Selves to Defend, that the female person is not really recognized in law. The law always presumes that person is masculine. And in fact, down here in Tasmania a couple of years ago, they actually reworded, what is it? Essentially, in terms of going to court, if you've been victimized, there's an expectation that in whatever circumstances you were in, that you acted reasonably. And they had to reword it so that it was no longer a reasonable person, but a reasonable woman in terms of assault cases. So they were specifically saying to people, you have to change your mindset from thinking, well, this woman in this circumstance where she was assaulted or raped would not act like a man. She would act like a woman. And I thought that was very significant.
Yes, yeah.
Wait, can you? I don't quite understand what you're saying. Can you
okay.
Explain that?
There's a notion that you, okay, say you were robbed, right? And the way the law treats how you were victimized, in some degree, requires that you acted reasonably to some extent. So like if you dropped your wallet and just left it there, sort of thing, that we as individuals are responsible for taking some measure of responsibility for our own actions. And that has an influence on the way the court views whatever criminal act was done to you or against you. And this basically says, rather than saying, did that woman act reasonably as a reasonable person to, or did she get herself into this situation, which is a whole nother discussion, that they actually changed the words to say, did this woman act as a reasonable woman? And then you get people start to think in their mind, well, women are smaller. Women try to accommodate women. These are the things that we know about women and how they behave. And then rather than sitting there in the jury box and saying, well, if I was in that, I'm a bloke, and if I was in that situation, I would have never let that happen. This is asking people to step out of that linguistic and intellectual space and into the space that women inhabit. Does that make sense?
Can that be, can it be abused to be like, well, what is a good woman?
I don't really know. Like I said, it was just a change in the laws here regarding sexual assault, and just getting that single concept changed. And I don't think it implies that you are good, morally good or morally bad or any of that sort of thing. But did you behave in a way that we can reasonably expect a person to behave in that situation?
Yeah.
Anyways,
I understand that. I'm just sort of, I guess I'm afraid that it will be abused in the courts just because much.
Anything's going to be abused in the courts. I mean, that's just a given. The defense lawyer is going to cast aspersions any way they can. But it was interesting that somebody made a conscious choice and changed the language. Anyways, that was, it happened a few years back.
They're changing a lot of language is being used in all sorts of different ways. And in these few examples in Australia and now on Twitter, I'm interested to see how gender identity will be used, and the word gender. I think Twitter has added gender as an identity group.
Gender and gender identity.
Gender and gender identity, and I don't really know how those two are different, but
gender is sort of being used as the stand-in for sex here. So
it's used interchangeably.
I don't have a gender identity, but I'm the female gender. I rationalize that as I'm the female sex, obviously. But basically what it's saying is gender identity is internal, and it's something you proclaim. This is my gender identity. If you don't proclaim a gender identity, you're labeled with your sex, i.e. in the new verbiage, gender.
It'll be interesting to see how that's used, because I think since I first looked at the Twitter survey, it's changed, and they've added a few more identity groups, and they've changed the examples that was focusing on genitalia to completely different examples.
Reducing people to their genitalia was one of the examples.
It was, but it's not there now, which is
exactly. They obviously got enough negative feedback that got scrapped. So again, it'll be really interesting to see how this progresses, because they do seem to be listening. I don't know how much, or what will happen down the road, but they do seem to be listening.
Yeah, because so many women are being banned from Twitter. It's
for saying penis is male. Women don't have penises, that sort of thing.
Oh, and doesn't even have to be that inflammatory. It can just be, really, really basic things people are getting banned for. And on Facebook.
Banned,
yeah.
Like I said, it's the policing of language. This is all very fascist. It really is, and I don't use that word lightly.
No, and compelling speech through law is insane. That's how can you have freedom of speech with compelled speech?
Democracy is not our natural state.
No.
We have lived in a very brief period of largely democratic societies in the West.
Yeah.
And we've kind of taken it for granted. At least my generation and onward, I feel like, you know, it's all we've ever known. And we're kind of sitting here, I think, a little bit gobsmacked at the way a lot of countries have reverted to fairly fascist tendencies. And, you know, I'm not just talking Turkey. There's a very strong nationalistic far-right movement happening in a lot of European countries, including, you know, those bastions of liberalism like Sweden.
Yes.
You know, not happening just in the usual suspects, if you will.
And how do you see that as a fairly organized effort, or, you know, is there a
power will always seek power, and we are concentrating wealth.
Yeah.
Our media is very concentrated into very few very wealthy hands who are looking out for their interest and nothing else. They're controlling our governments through, you know, the sort of attacks that the media engage on anyone who's deemed threatening to them, anyone who's running in any sort of liberal or progressive policy platform is well, you know, I don't know much about UK politics, but I do know that there's an awful lot of press aimed at Corbyn around anti-Semitism. And again, I know nothing about the accuracy of that, if there is any accuracy. I do know it's being heavily exploited by the so-called liberal media. Yeah.
Do you think how do you think women fit into all of that? Are we a threat, or are we a nuisance, or are we?
Well, the underclasses are always a threat.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why the establishment can never really take their eye off the ball, and they never do. Again, people are always like, oh, well, it sounds like you mean that they're all sitting around in some back room smoking cigars and conspiring. And it's like, no, they don't have to conspire. The whole system is set up to privilege any thought, any act that is in their behalf, that works for them, and to make us fearful of stepping outside of the boundaries that have been established for those of us who aren't, you know, in one way, shape, or form part of the privileged class.
And this is what we're seeing on the left of politics, aren't we? Of even the left is policing women. Well, and
the left is center right at this point. The right has so far right. I'm sorry.
Oh, neoliberalism is a right-wing concept that comes from the 80s with, you know, Thatcher and Reagan. So
I remember Reagan and Thatcher very well. You know, there is no society, only individuals.
Oh, yeah.
And well, look, this is transgenderism in a nutshell.
The individual.
You don't get to have any material, realistic response to me. I get to determine how you address me, how you view me. It's all about me. It's all about me and my self-actualization, my true self, living my true identity. It's all about my having this internal sense of self that is totally divorced from everyone and anything except for how I perceive myself. And I will tell you what that is, and you have to treat me accordingly.
Do you think this is why liberal... Sorry.
I was going to say, I think the fact that Malta passed gender ID laws, and I mean, this is a country of 450,000 people, and it's being held up as, look, it's working there. I think the fact that this has happened has been really bad because people aren't taking into context that, you know, Malta is 90% Catholic identified for starters. And so there's a huge social backlash for anybody abusing that system. And it's such a small country that up and down the country, anybody who does abuse self-ID gender laws is going to be smeared across the entire country very fast. So, you know, when this is held up as, oh, look, it's working over here, it's not necessarily going to translate when you take it outside of the Catholic identity and outside of a tiny island.
Yeah, well, it's more of a test tube than a test case. Anytime you have a social system that is, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, where there's a group identity, you have very strong inter-community rules that, as you say, people are loath to run afoul of, and there tends to be very swift reaction when they do. Whereas when you have people coming from a lot of different backgrounds, and again, this is not to cast aspersions on any particular culture, but just to say that you have a lot less people aren't allowed to police each other as much. Basically, it's that sort of, well, they just do it that way. And when I'm out in public, I just kind of keep my head down and I don't say something because, you know, I don't really know if that's appropriate to speak up in that circumstances. So it's very different when, as you say, you don't have a cohesive group. It'll be interesting. I would love, and this is one of the things so many feminists are saying, is that if men IDing as women meant that they were no longer a male risk, we would all be, you know, rushing for it. We would all be saying, this is wonderful. You know, let's have this large group of men opt out of masculinity, which means they're no longer a threat. But it's not.
It's not the case. It's men have got into prisons, women's prisons, and they've gone on raping sprees in there. And, you know, the people backing this gender identity stuff aren't even calling them out and saying, look, this is an abuse of the system and we need to protect the people who are not like that, while making sure that we've got some kind of safeguards against this happening.
Well, that would require a very difficult conversation for us to have as a society, which is to say, we have a very large proportion of the male population who are very abusive to women. And they will take any and every opportunity. They will create opportunities in order to exercise this level of abuse. And we're not, as a society, even with Kavanaugh, we're not as a society willing to have that conversation. And that's a big part of what's going on right now, is that in order to discuss the risks posed by transgender ideology and the erasing of women as a sex class, we have to be able to talk about men as a sex class. And that's pretty much verboten, you know, that's off limits. We're not allowed to really bring that up. And if we do bring that up, we end up like this poor Dr. Ford, having to move out of her own home and getting death threats against herself and her family. And it happens not just on that scale or that level, it happens to all of us all the time. There's always, in public, when you say things that you know, basically that men use all of these methods to keep women in line, even the good ones, you know, no matter how good of a man you think you are, or your friends are, you are engaging in this level of control over the women around you. And they're not ready to have that conversation at all.
No, when I think of like one of the best men I ever knew, and you know, he was very respectful, he had been raised well, he was aware, but even he would sit on the fence and not say anything when there was sexist bullshit happening around him, because he didn't want to rock the boat. And it's like, that's being a beneficiary of male power, even if you're not exercising it personally.
Well, you know, I've often said, scratch any man deep enough and you'll find a misogynist. And not to say that I haven't had men in my life that I like, or that I still don't have men in my life that, you know, I'd be willing to go out with, have a beer with, that sort of thing. I'm fairly comfortable with people in general. But yeah, look, I worked very hard not to be a beneficiary of white privilege. And yet, on the other hand, I'm physically disabled. And I know that what ease I have in accessing the healthcare system and navigating the healthcare system comes largely from my whiteness. Yeah, it doesn't hurt that I'm articulate.
Difficult even as a white person.
Pardon?
It's damn difficult even as a white person to access health benefits and disability benefits.
Exactly. Any wind at my back and I'm going to take it. But on the other hand, I'm actively anti-racist. I don't think you can ever say I'm not racist. I mean, I wasn't raised on the moon. I was raised here, and therefore I was raised in a racist society, and therefore I have racist thoughts and presumptions in my head. But on the other hand, I can choose to educate myself about the effects of racism and be actively anti-racist, which is to say that I do speak up when somebody else says something. I do bring up things even if nobody else does. So if you're a man, I think you have to be actively anti-masculinist, is that a word? And you have to be, you have to actively challenge masculinity in yourself and other men, rather than say, oh, well, I'm not sexist, because that's bullshit. Everybody's sexist. I'm a woman, I'm sexist. Again, I was raised on this planet. I was raised in a sexist culture. I have sexist presumptions about women. And only by bringing them up to my level of awareness am I able to turn around and say, well, my sexism is telling me, well, that, you know, that woman or whatever, she's just not trying. She's just not whatever we think of women. And saying, well, hang on, that's a wrong presumption, and I'm functioning on cruise control. I'm functioning on the level that I took all this information in through my life that told me that I can dismiss women.
It's just constantly.
We've got this term. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. I was going to say we've got this term, internalized misogyny. But it's like, I think we need to have a term now that is internalized masculinity, or unhealthy expressions of masculinity.
Well, I'm actually.
It isn't.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I actually am against this whole idea of toxic masculinity. Masculinity is toxic. There aren't non-toxic levels of masculinity.
Yeah, it's redundant, isn't it?
Yeah, by saying toxic masculinity, we're saying that it's okay to be a bloke as long as you don't do these toxic things. And it's like, no, it's not okay to be a bloke. It's not, you know, masculinity and femininity are in and of themselves toxic.
Yeah, as
it's
ideas,
right? Yeah, it's not to say that the expressions that we call masculine and feminine are necessarily wrong. It's that they are put into this particular code of behaviors that are then imposed upon us, whether we want them or not, and they carry meaning in the larger culture that, you know, are very bad in terms of their outcomes. We can look at those. We can say people who have this level of sexist belief engage in more violence towards women, right?
That goes back to the law that you were talking about. You know, when you have one group of people raised a certain way and then another group of people raised an entirely different way, then, you know, each group of people are going to react differently in a situation. So that should be put into the law. Does that make sense? Like when you were talking about the sexual assault law earlier, where women wouldn't react to the same situation as men would?
Yes.
So this was now written into the law? Is that what you were saying before?
Well, the law was changed the wording in terms of the presumption of a reasonable person, simply to create the possibility of a shift in focus in the mind of the person being asked to see this as a reasonable woman. That's all the law was doing, was changing the way that the jury was being addressed in terms of did this victim behave as in a reasonable way, and how does that affect our perception of the victimizer? Anyways, like I said, you can only do so much with the laws. You can't change the inside people's heads, but you can say, maybe you can have this shift of focus in this particular instance. And anyways, like I said, I thought it was a good thing and well thought out in terms of changing wording in the court system.
I would love to do more research on that. Is there a way is there something I can Google search to find out more about that?
Tasmania, reasonable woman, sexual assault might get you what you're looking for. I'm willing to look it up. I'm on Twitter. I'm Diva Ex Machina. If you,
hey.
I'm more than willing. I'm also the woman who has the patty melons. So, yeah, if you've seen pictures of patty melons on your Twitter feed, that's me.
I don't have it. I don't have a Twitter. I'm not on any social media except YouTube.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, it's a play on Deus Ex Machina, which is comes from Greek theater. Anyways, but yeah, that's me on Twitter, and that's one of the baddies.
I wanted to ask everyone what they thought of Jackson Catt's work with masculinity, where he challenges men in workshops about, like, he works from toxic masculinity. So, you know, I just wanted to see what people thought of that.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah. Neither am I. I don't know who that is.
Oh, okay. I'll put it in the box here. His name's Jackson Katz, and what he does is he works mostly with men who have found themselves in very frustrated space and lashing out, not necessarily violent, but that some of them may have been, but feeling like, you know, they're having issues dealing with the world in a healthy manner. And he works at the very base level of what are the messages that you've received in life and how have they affected you? And how can you become a, I guess, a person who isn't constantly drawing from masculinity, but instead is valuing every person around you as an equal human being? And men have come out of these workshops saying that he's just absolutely changed their lives, that they've lost this sense of frustration at the world.
That sounds a lot like the Good Man Project.
Oh,
it's another organization.
Look, I actually have a book called Women Respond to the Men's Movement. And I'm sorry, but I am always suspicious when men are trying to deal with masculinity, because ultimately I think they're trying to, what's the word for it? I think they're trying to find a good masculinity and not have to let go of masculinity as a concept, but saying that there is this reactive part of myself that is constantly trying to judge my own value vis-a-vis masculine expectations. And that part is toxic. That part can't be redeemed. So I'm going to let go of that reactive self, but I'm going to reframe masculinity as this good thing, you know, these good aspects, and not let go of masculinity as a whole. Before John Stoltenberg went all transpositive, he wrote a book called Refusing to Be a Man. And in that book, he's a gay man. He lived with Andrea Dworkin.
Yeah.
So they lived together for about 30 years. They essentially were non-sexual partners. He inherited her estate. He basically talks about having to, it's not being a better man, it's not being a man. And from a gay man's point of view, he talks about how gay culture deals with the contradictions in two men being together in a society where sexuality is framed in terms of, masculine and feminine. There's, the doer, or as the Greeks would say, the lover and the beloved. There's the subject and there's the object. And he talks a lot about how gay male culture has redeemed those aspects without taking away masculinity from any of the individuals. I mean, it's basically saying you can be a bottom, but it doesn't make you any less masculine because you are part of an act which reifies masculinity. It's like being a private in the army, okay? You have no social status whatsoever, but you're part of this massive masculine endeavor. So that's the whole,
I mean, just to add to that, I think, like, I don't know if any of these have been framed in a way to actually reevaluate how they see women in the society. And, Andrea Dworkin talked a lot about humanizing women. And so that's another aspect of, like, these males sort of trying to hold on to their masculinity and not and reframing it and not really even kind of getting at it from even another perspective. Does that make sense? Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I think it's near impossible unless you 150% devote yourself the feminist consciousness to see women as human. It just isn't part of our society. I talk about one of the reasons men get so frustrated when we challenge them is that it's like the furniture starts talking. You know, it's not a battle of the sexes. It isn't a battle. It's an all-out one-way, you know, slaughter. There in terms of this, you know, people talk about the binary. Well, it's not 1 and 2. It's 1 and 0. There is presence, which is masculinity. There's intellect, which is masculinity. There is human, which is masculinity. And there is the absence of those things, which is femininity. So it's presence and absence, as opposed to two presents, you know, vying, one, you know, getting off better than the other one. It's, you know, we're the background. We are the stage on which they construct their heroic selves. And when we suddenly get up and behave like anything other than the stage and the furniture, you know, the football, whatever it is, it confounds them, and they lash out because they don't know how to react to that.
Yeah, when you were saying like we're seen as the furniture, it just it really has it like it's like there's this thing. Sorry, I got a little bit inarticulate. It's like selective sociopathy. Like I used to think that if you were a sociopath, you were just a sociopath across the board. But I've seen men act very compassionately to each other and show like behaviors and all sorts of things that would make you believe that they were a full person when they're, you know, talking to and you know, living their lives with each other. But with women, it's like they become a sociopath. It's just it's like hard for me to process that. Like I would have thought that if you're a sociopath, you'd just be that to everybody, or you just wouldn't be one.
Sociopaths are actually quite charming. I was just reading the other day somebody saying that, you know, she said to her therapist or whatever, well, my husband has anger issues, and, you know, he goes and sees somebody, and the therapist saying, well, does he just behave that way with you and the kids, or does he behave that way with everybody? And she's like, oh no, just me and the kids. And the therapist says he doesn't have anger issues, he's an abuser. You know, it's stepping out of that frame that says it's allowed in this circumstance with this individual. Go ahead.
I came across a theory, and I don't know who to credit with this theory. So it's not from me, but this is from like 25 years ago from reading. And it was putting male as normal, and gave examples from, you know, politics, social policy, medicine, that the average was always the male average, and that woman was deviant from normal, from average. And so when you say, you know, like the sociopathy towards women, I think it comes from that. It comes from the normalization of average Joe and the deviation of woman from normal.
Again, there was something I read, and again, it was a while ago, but that this woman basically had people fill out psychological assessments. So write down what you think is healthy individual and an unhealthy individual. Okay, just whatever came to mind. And then write down what you thought was female, and then what you thought was male. And basically, healthy individual was male, and unhealthy individual was female. So there were these two groupings that people just automatically said, oh, well, being, you know, clingy or whatever words that people associate with women fell into their list of unhealthy as well. So she didn't ask them to gender. these lists, she basically said, write down everything you think about men, write down everything you think about women, write down everything you think about a healthy person, write down everything you think about an unhealthy person. So basically, that's what we're stuck with, is this presumption in people's heads that a healthy person is male. A person is male.
Yeah. And that's the bottom line of it, isn't it? That it's not just a healthy person, it's a person, full stop. It's who do you give humanity to?
Yep, exactly. And, this is why all of these battles, so to speak, over language are so fraught, is because in order to say, well, the word woman means something, you're kind of stuck where the word woman means the absence of something. And because it means the absence of something, it's there to be co-opted. It's there to be filled by someone whose masculine being actually means something. So they have more claim in some sense than we do.
Yeah, Germaine Greer pointed this out in her book, The Whole Woman, which came out in the year 2000. I remember reading it back then. And she gave one of the first kind of breakdowns of intersex and trans. And one of the things she said was there's two categories, male and other.
Yeah. Non-men, as the Greens have so, lovingly called. Yeah, exactly. We aren't allowed to have our own territory. Any territory we occupy is ripe for the taking by men, because we are not legitimate holders of territory. We are not legitimate holders of meaning. We are not legitimate holders of, essentially any concept. So anything that we say, hey, this is ours, is there's a man out there that's going to be able to say, well, no, it's not. It actually belongs to me. And he's going to get uptake. Whereas there can be, it's this whole thing like Adrian Harp and that the billboard that said woman. There were all these women, myself included, who basically said, well, this is bullshit, that this is being taken down, and this is the reason why it's there. And there were all of us, being very articulate as to why it was wrong for this company to take that down. And all you had to have was one man who routinely calls women bitches and cunts and is just really a horrible human being, has doxed people, literally gone and said, look, I'm putting up all the information about where you live and who your kids' names and whatever. And if you don't, if you don't take down your entire Twitter account, I'll leave that all up. Yeah. And he's just an obscene individual, but he can speak as a man, and, he's valid. Point is immediately validated simply by the fact he has a penis.
Yeah.
Okay, well, to fill that pause, speaking of interviews that have gone on in the last week with Miss Parker Posey or Mrs. Kelly Keane Mitchell, is it? Something like that. But did anyone see the conversation that, very one-sided conversation with India Willoughby?
Oh, yeah, I watched that.
I didn't watch that.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say, yeah, I can't watch India Willoughby. I just cannot.
I know.
It's hard.
Well, the funny thing about India, the funny thing I found out with that interview was like, it doesn't, what did he say? He said something about like, it doesn't matter, or he was alluding to the fact it was a fetish. He didn't like come out and say it, But on Big Brother, he like was parading around topless half the time. Like it was very fetishistic. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I just had wondered if anyone watched that, and they just all ganged up on her because I guess they're colleagues with one another as well. So
yeah. Was this the Good Morning interview?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, I did see that.
Yeah, I watched it, and I loved the fact that Posey said, "No, I don't see you as a woman." You know, just outright, bam. And she also did say to them, "Let's, you know, stop getting all personal about this and talk about the broader issue."
Right. They made it about India's feelings.
Yeah. And it's not about one person.
Not at all.
Well, that transgenderism is very good about collapsing the ideology into the individual. So rather than saying that we can discuss this as an ideology, they want to discuss it as that individual person, how this has made their life better, or how you're attacking them. So it's for them, it has worked to keep it all at the level of the individual, because that tends to, you know, we tend to feel compassionate towards an individual, and there's no, you know, there's no reason why we shouldn't feel compassionate towards an individual, but we can also say the ideology is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, queer theory does that too. It takes away the agency of an oppressed group of people to like name their oppressor. By making everything into an individual issue.
It's totally anti-structural, and feminism is totally structural. We're not speaking the same language.
Not at all.
And also this individualizing, it's all about the man feels. Nobody's asking, how does this affect the way women feel? You know, it's like, how can a man's feelings be more important, or the only ones that matter? And women's reality and even material, you know, existence isn't even able for discussion.
I have a question for everybody in the room. I'm wondering, it just occurred to me, do you think that some heterosexual men support trans activism because they sense that it benefits them as a man?
Oh, of course they do. The way patriarchy works is there's no, you know, again, there's not a room full of men who sit around and say, oh, let's come up with this whole idea of transgenderism and we'll think out how this will benefit us. It basically, it's constantly working on a level throughout all of society, in which something that comes along that it can exploit, it does. So within transgenderism, it wasn't always this, you know, dick fest. It really wasn't. But it became that very quickly, because within the concepts, the construct of transgenderism, there was this element of, you know, autogynephilia. That's how you say that. Anyways, that the guys who get off on it, the fetish aspect. And it latched on to the fetish aspect because, to speak quite frankly, anything that gives a man a stiffy, he's going to go and repeat that action over and over and over again. And so it was able to say, oh, look, there's this element within transgenderism that's all about getting it up. And it's very misogynistic. And it will just keep, you know, we'll keep nudging it along on a more patriarchal path.
I understand that, but I'm talking not the autogynephiles, but like I guess
no, the heterosexual men.
To use their word,
the guys outside of it who are just loving the idea that they can support their transsexual like sisters because it allows them to basically shit all over women. and they sense that.
There's more to it, I reckon.
Yeah,
like we can. More to it. Oh, sorry, go for it.
We can go into the bathrooms and we can like go into their sports and like they can't like gather with themselves as much as.
Oh, it's all about.
I kind of like that.
It is all about the policing of women. Women, apart from men, are the thing they are most fearful of. It's why when women have tried to have meetings back in this era of consciousness raising, and they'd find men hidden under the bleachers. That the men are just frightened, you know, as frightened as they can be of anything. They are frightened of women apart from men and not under men's direct control. And the idea that we are no longer allowed to have separate spaces, you know, just really makes them very happy.
I think there's a sexual component to the heterosexual men that support the trans as well. And my belief is that most men are bisexual in reality, that they actually show love for one another all over the place. If you look at male bonding amongst heterosexual men, there is an element of desire in there. So they get men now dressing as women and saying, oh yes, a trans woman is a woman. And this then gives them license to physically and sexually love other men that they don't have under masculinity.
I would agree with you there. I would also say that men are not so much homoerotic as they're homosocial. Everyone they love, really well and truly love, everyone they well and truly admire is male.
Yes.
Yeah, I try
romantic feelings for other men, but sexual feelings for women.
Yes, I think, and there probably is a blurring of the line here that a lot of men do enjoy, whether it's purely on a sexual level or not. But yeah, men are definitely, what's her name? Barbara, I've got the book in the other room. You know, she did all those photographs with the red text on them, and you know how like men have to invent these ways.
Kruger,
thank you. You know, men have to invent ways of being able to touch other men. I mean, all of the contact sports, all of the jostling, all of the, you know, that male camaraderie that they do is giving them license to actually touch each other. And not in a sexual way, but again, in a homosocial way. Yeah, anyways, yeah, no, there's a lot of, there's so many boundaries that are being crossed in a way that isn't getting rid of the boundary, it's reifying the boundary.
I think
if that makes sense.
The reason that I was thinking, I don't know whether, okay. Yeah, the reason I'm thinking that there is an actual sexual component to this is looking at two genres of porn. And one of them is sissification porn. It's where there will be a dominant male and a submissive male who is treated like a female. And this is, or, you know, hegemonic masculinity, hegemonic femininity played out between two men. And the idea behind it is that they're getting off on being humiliated by being treated like a woman. And then you've got this other genre of porn, which is chicks with dicks. And these are two very popular genres. So who's watching this? It's men. It's not women getting off on it. It's men. And I think there's repressed homosexuality and bisexuality in men.
I think also men are attracted to the construct of femininity. So, well, you know, they made it up, right? It's all come from their brain.
It belongs to them, then they have it.
So yeah, exactly. Well, they're attracted to their own construction of femininity, And another point where you're talking about sissification pornography, I mean, that's across the board with men who want to be so-called submissives. They, you know, even if it's a female who's supposedly the dominant, their only fantasy of being humiliated is being what they perceive as being treated as a woman. So yeah, I think there's a definite, and that's across the board in the sort of the BDSM community, if you want to call it that.
I think it goes beyond the BDSM community as to who's watching it, though, because a lot of married men are trans after watching sissification porn and identifying with the so-called female role. And I say so because we all know this is not women, it's a male construct.
Right.
Do you think there would be a transgenderism movement without pornography?
No.
I would say to some extent, yes, because, you know, I was brought up in New Zealand and we had Wha'awhine in New Zealand, which is the Samoan third gender, but it came out very differently. You know, it's not like the trans movement as we understand it through, I guess, the American-driven movement that we have now. It was simply accepted as a man in the social role of a woman.
The third way that a lot of cultures do have is always a gay man, essentially. There is no third way that involves women stepping out of the feminine role. There are cultures that basically have, as a way of dealing with the challenge to heteronormativity, heterosexism, have created a role for gay men that takes them and puts them over in this box over here, but doesn't change masculine, feminine. It leaves those boxes intact. And interestingly enough, there was a study done in the United States that looked at the cultures, the American Indian cultures that had what some people call two-spirit people. And they were almost all very warlike cultures. So you look at the cultures that were most egalitarian, and they didn't have two-spirit. But the ones where men were expected to be warriors, and you had men who essentially weren't going to cut it, they were put in this box over here.
I don't know if I would compare two-spirit to transgenderism, though. I think.
Oh, I'm not. I'm not at all. I think it's totally a separate thing. It's being co-opted. Everything in transgenderism is being co-opted from somebody else. They're basically saying all these people in history, Joan of Arc, whatever, was a trans man. These people, everybody is being retroactively transgendered. You're being told, like Hannah Gadsby was being told that she should come out as a trans man. Everything in transgenderism is co-opting something else. So they're looking at two-spirit people. In the Maori culture, they're looking at, you know, Hijira, I think they're pronounced in India. They're looking at all these people and saying, oh, it's all transgenderism, and it's always been here all throughout history, and we're all transgenders, and we're just going to take over everything and co-opt everything as ours.
It's really cannibalistic and parasitic.
And colonizing. They're colonizing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all of those things.
Yes.
It's peak neoliberalism. It's you know, it's peak everything. It's peak trans. It's peak everything. So yeah, no, it's just like I said, I'm sitting down here.
It also wants to. I'm sorry, just it's also meant to, I think, erase sexuality in a way. You know, like it's robbed lesbians of saying we are lesbians, or you know, they're trying to, I think, come after even anyone's sexuality. Really, there are no sexualities, right? It's all a mishmash.
Everybody has to be open to penis, essentially, is what it comes down to. No matter who you are, you cannot exclude penis from your sexuality. And it's functioned, yeah, it's functioned very good, very well as a foil against lesbianism, which again, you know, we are like unicorns. We're that thing that gets talked about but doesn't really exist, because how can you have two women without a man? I mean, without a man, what's that? You know?
And it goes back to what you were saying, how men fear women on their own being without them. That's like,
Yep.
I think,
and
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm good. You go ahead.
Oh, this is kind of like a wild idea. I haven't like developed it at all, but I think women with different sexualities should form an alliance, like you know, non-practicing heterosexual and lesbians and celibates and, you know, bisexual women who choose not to date men, just like women with all different sexuality, and asexual women, like coming together and uniting in choosing not to have sex with men or like not pursue men in that.
Well, I'm all for Lysistrata. I think, you know, it would be great if women just basically said, nope, not doing it, guys. You go over there and fix yourselves. And when you have, we'll get back, you know, come back over and we'll talk. You know, I'm all for, I don't know if you know the reference Lysistrata, but it's
the Italian film?
No, it's a Greek, ancient, it was written in ancient Greek, and the name again escapes me of the author. And basically the women go on strike. The women basically say, we're sick and tired of your warring and all of your crap, and no sex for you.
Oh, that was Chirac. That was made into a Spike Lee movie, I think, based on.
Yeah, no, it's been adapted a lot of different ways, but the original was written in ancient Greek, and I don't know why I can't remember the author. But anyways, yeah, it was written by a man. But like I said, women should go full Lysistrata. I'm totally in favor of that.
Oh, I can't wait until that day comes.
Let's start this now.
Yeah, I find that one very, because for me personally, I do like sex with men, and I find it it's probably the thing where I feel like I'm letting women down, you know, is in that personal life. And then I think, well, you know, we've all got to find the right, you know, pathway for ourselves. And yeah, there's got to be some way that you can actually still, I guess, interact with men and still center women.
Well, I don't think that's impossible at all. I think most of the third wave feminism, you know, was women who were having to figure out how to, you know, the personal and the political, how to take the theoretical, what they were talking about with other women, and not only take it home, but, you know, deal with their personal lives and all the inherent contradictions.
I think when you center women too, with radical feminism, you're focusing on women first, and then you can make your choices after that. But if you're women focused, then you're moving in the right direction.
Well, again, it's called consciousness raising for a reason. You have to be conscious. You have to get out of that rut that we're all in, the comfort zone, you know, the cruise control. You have to make yourself aware of what you're doing and what you're thinking. And you have to basically say, well, you know, is this in line with my values? And if it isn't, then, you know, try to come up with some way to improve that. Like I said, I'm physically disabled, and that means that there are all sorts of things that I wouldn't choose, but within the choices that I have, I try to make the best one.
Yeah.
Such a good question. Answer, because it's going to be different for everyone. But yeah, and it's also everybody's.
Aristophanes.
What's that?
Aristophanes is the writer of Lysistrata.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
I wanted to know. Somebody type that up. Thank you.
Yeah, that was me.
Well, I'm glad somebody remembered.
Yeah, well, I just got a link, and it said the name on this, where I just copied it from the internet.
Well, it's not what you know; it's what you can find in time. That's I always tell people you don't have to have all the information in your brain; you just have to know how to look for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of separatism, I'm like here and there with it, like, because I do still have male friends, and especially with the transgender issue, it seems like my heterosexual male friends get it more than some of the women that are in my life that have already drunk the Kool-Aid, so to speak. They're spelling woman with an X, like, they're doing things that it's hard for me to broach the subject with them. But
women are so socialized to be accommodating, to be compassionate, all that sort of stuff. And this whole movement has totally been about appeals to emotion. And I think that's one of why so many women get sucked into it, and a lot of men are still skeptical.
It's like they have a man in their brain or something. Don't they call that male identified? Is that what people mean by that? Or
yeah, a little bit. I think what was I saying about you were saying about compassion and empathy, right? So I think like the majority, if you look at it in terms of like, I think Lisa Muggeridge talks about this in terms of like an abusive relationship. These women have been gaslit into the emotional appeal, like the Inda Willoughby thing, the interview that don't you care about her feelings, and like, that kind of thing. And that's a tactic that abusers will use to turn the tables on you and reverse the victim.
Darvo thing.
Darvo, right.
That was so like,
and the whole threatening suicide. Abusive men do that all the time. Oh my God, if you leave me, I'll kill myself.
Abusive people,
over and over and over again. These are not new tactics. And again and again and again, they've proven successful.
Yeah, they have.
Hello?
We've still got a lot of compassion for people going through transition. It's not like we've lost that. We're just have compassion for women at the same time. And there's a balance.
That compassion extends to the way the medical and pharmaceutical industries are treating trans people as experiments. Like, of course, you feel compassionate for the children that are being gaslit and trans, and the adults who are going through surgeries and then reversing them and all these sorts of things. There's a lot of compassion there.
Yeah, they're creating lifelong patients. It's very scary.
And you can have compassion and keep your distance. You can have boundaries, and you can be compassionate.
That's right.
But that's on an individual level. I feel compassion for an individual going through that, but then there's the analysis of how that affects women as a group and transgender people as a group, and that's what we're talking about.
Well, it's like I tell people sometimes, and I have had people come back to me, especially around the trans issue, and be like, well, it's so mean. You're not taking into account like this, that, and the other thing. And me having to say, look, I'm telling you feminist theory, okay? I could tell you theoretical physics, but I wouldn't build a house with it. There's a distinction between being able to say, this is the broader theory, this is the broader scope. This is the integrated system. And these are our individual lives and how we function within them. And I don't go around, there are transsexual like guys in Hobart, okay? I live just outside Hobart, Tasmania. And there's, 500,000 people in the greater Hobart area. No, there's 500,000 people in Tasmania. There's about 300,000 in the greater Hobart area. I know all the transsexuals. I mean, I couldn't not. It's a small community. I've had transsexual people in my house eating dinner. And on the other hand, I am a lesbian separatist, but I can do that. I can juggle that. I can say within this scope of inviting people over for somebody's birthday or whatever, I'll invite their friends, which include transsexuals. That's fine. I don't have an issue with that. I've actually had conversations with transsexuals, and they are transsexuals here. I haven't met any of the transgenders yet. I can have conversations where I can talk about what I find problematic about transsexuals. And we've managed to be polite with one another. So again, it's not like I don't have empathy and politeness and compassion towards anybody in my life. But on the other hand, I can say
when it's face to face.
Yes, here's the broader construct. And I can say that. And I'm allowed to say that. And women don't feel like we're allowed to say that. We don't feel like we're allowed to say, look, here's this broader, theoretical, and theory is again very masculine. So we're not supposed to operate on that level. We're supposed to be down here in empathy. I'm basically starting out by saying I'm invading your territory. And they all get their hackles up just because of that. Not even what I'm saying, just the fact that I'm saying. But I'm allowed to say that.
I feel like the actual gender critical position is the most compassionate anyway. I mean, when we at children being going through child abuse, I mean, this is what it is. They're medicated and surgically altered at such a young age that, it's for life. There are consequences down the road, and people are getting hurt. Lesbians are getting hurt, very much so. It's the most compassionate view in the world to say, look.
Oh, again, especially with lesbians, there's been people writing about how, there aren't any little, baby butches anymore. They're all getting trans. I mean, that's just horrific. I mean, I never identified as butch or femme. But I was always thrown into the butch category because I could fix my car and that sort of stuff. And I can just see how this would have been me. I'm very high functioning Asperger's. I don't say that lightly. I've been diagnosed. As a kid, I was not high functioning. I very easily obsessed about things. I was very smart. I was very different, and I wanted to be a boy. And if somebody had told me that was possible, I would have been trans. And I absolutely adore being a woman. And,
they're pathologizing puberty and childhood and homosexuality as well.
Yep.
So
all of it. And
I mean, puberty is the scariest one, because puberty, honestly, when I see these interviews, when I see media made about these children, it's like puberty is scary for, girls in particular in this culture. But I think it's a time for everybody of confusion. Your body is going through so many changes.
Every year. Yep. Totally.
So it's like pathologizing this very natural, normal experience that, many of us have, that, I mean, in a more equal society, I don't think would even be happening. I really don't.
No, it's definitely.
I'm sure the drug companies love that. It's like,
sorry.
We'll just take, teenagers' natural, like, being uncomfortable when they're going through puberty puberty and rebrand it as like they need to take these pills to feel better about their body.
Discomfort has been made pathological. Look at the number of people, and myself included, who are on antidepressants. It's just, as a society, there is this huge gap between what is, allowable unhappiness and the consumer products, the capitalistic solution for it. There's this sort of,
because you're trying to fill a hole with something that's not going to do anything for you. The materialism.
It doesn't address the actual problem itself. It, again, look at alcohol. Look at all the ways that we use to dull our reaction to our lives that are very much less than the idealized version that we're sold that we should be living.
Yeah, it's escapism.
It's all of these coming together. It's sexism, it's capitalism, you name it. All the isms are on board. They really are. There's racist factors. Almost all of the people involved in this movement are white. And again, we take in a lot of African refugees here in Tasmania. And we do have a couple of individuals who were given refugee status here because they are transsexuals. And so it's not that those people don't exist in non-white cultures. It's that the ideology of transgenderism is very white, is very elitist, is very Western. And so it's basically, it's got all the racist elements in it. It's got all the colonial elements in it. Like I said, you name it, it's got it.
Peak everything. Peak isms.
It is.
Where you said you think that it wouldn't exist, if that we weren't in a sexist culture, this kind of difficulty in puberty. And I'm thinking it would. Even if we erased sexism and racism, I think puberty itself is this horribly confusing time where you're no longer a girl. You're moving into womanhood, or you're no longer a boy, you're moving into manhood, but you're not an adult yet either.
Without a sexist society, you wouldn't be moving from girl to woman. You would be moving from child to adult. And that's not that scary. It is a challenge, but it's not that scary because it's not loaded with all of the expectations that come with woman.
What if we weren't sexualizing young girls, at such a early age, what if we lived in that kind of...
That's the point I was trying to address, but I never got to finish.
Okay.
I think that it is extremely confusing to go from childhood to adulthood because you feel ready for adulthood because you want all these freedoms, but you're not there yet because you don't have the experience of dealing with things by yourself. So you do go between like being very mature to then, running to the parents for that safety net. That learning process itself, by itself, I personally think is very hard. And then you add all the sexism and feminism. Feminine and the masculine on top of it, and it becomes one of the hardest experiences ever.
I think, in my mind anyways, if we lived in an agender society, an ungendered society, the transition from child to adult would not be anywhere near as traumatic as it is now, because everything would be open. It would be, you would be able to say, well, I'm going to try this today and I'm going to try that tomorrow, and nobody's going to judge me for it. No one's going to tell me that only girls do that or only boys do that, or you're not being masculine enough, or you're not being feminine enough, or you really should try to get that degree in science because science, I did this. I went to get my degree in science and ended up with a degree in fine arts. I was going to university at a time when the economy was expanding in all the sciences. And so even though it wasn't girly, it was a good degree to have. So, you know, there's all these expectations that we put on children based on all these external values and external drivers. And I think that if we had an agendered, you know, a non-gendered society, we would have much more egalitarian society in terms of all the other aspects as well. Anyways, that's, you know, I'm not exactly a Starhawk fan or that sort of thing, but I
kind of dig her.
You do? That's fine. Yeah, I've read her and I have my objections, but I know a lot of people who love her. So, anyways,
no, I haven't read. Just have seen her talking sometimes.
Oh, okay.
But
yep.
Yeah, I might have a different. Sorry, keep going.
Hey, like I said, I'm not having a go at her or anything, but I think, you know, she definitely does address, you know, taking away gender and how that would have these huge flow-on effects throughout all of society. And I do agree.
What is her name?
She writes under. Yep, she writes under the name Starhawk.
She was part of, correct me if I'm wrong, she was part of that sort of revival of kind of, the documentary I saw her on was about the witches that the CBC put out like many years ago.
I think.
Neo-paganism, thank you, yeah.
Think of the Pussy Church.
Yeah,
I'm definitely a member. Yeah, I signed up.
Yeah,
I'm definitely making a film about it. So, yeah.
Oh wow!
Excellent. I was going to say I at that altar. I'm willing to say, yeah. And again, I've read. Look, Ursula Le Guin's *The Dispossessed* is an excellent read as well in terms of that egalitarian. Cultures and their limitations. Yeah. Anyways, there's lots to read on so many subjects.
What's the focus of your documentary
about the Pussy Church of Modern Witchcraft?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm gonna interview Kathy Brennan. Gonna go down to Baltimore. Hopefully, try to spend like a month down there with them.
Yeah.
Probably during a time when they would be celebrating some kind of, you know, I'm not into paganism, so I don't really know what but I'm pretty sure there's solstices coming up and that kind of thing.
We just passed an equinox, so we're another 3 months onto the solstice. But look, from what I've read of the emails that I get, they're not neo-pagans in a classical sense, but you know, this is very much about feminist spirituality, and and I'm all for it. I tell people I'm not an atheist because I consider myself a spiritual being in the sense that every single culture on this planet has created a spirituality.
We're hardwired to do that, aren't we?
Whatever it is, we've come up with some way of seeing ourselves within a much larger than ourselves construct. And I think it's very human to do that. Yeah. I don't think that means there's anything out there. I think it's, you know, it's been theorized that when we got a language center, we got a God center.
Yes.
It's also been theorized that entheogens, all of the plants that we use to get high on, that they create this sense of you know, connectivity that we don't experience on a day-to-day level. So maybe God was, you know, marijuana or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, even just like reverence for the earth is how I connect to any kind of spirituality, you know, nature and that kind of thing. And
me too. I'm very connected to nature. You might notice.
There's nature.
It's a big part of my life. Yeah, I mean, I would not be sane if I did not have nature in my life. It literally is my joy. And so yeah, I totally agree. I think there's this feminist spirituality definitely is about being a body, a living animal that has to live along with all the other animals and the other plants and all the elements that we share this world with.
What do you think about it in terms of creating a female-only space?
I think in the United States, it's very... Oh, go ahead, Ash.
I was just going to say the legal protections that come with being recognized as a religion, that's the meat of it. That's the best part.
Yeah. I've actually considered doing something similar with my property, just so that I have that sort of legal protection here. Because without that, you don't really, you can't really say, I'm just going to keep men out because they're men. There isn't a law that allows you to do that. But if you say, this is part of my religion, my spirituality, to have totally separate female space, they're good with that. Except for the little boys, like my little boy here.
Are you able to legally declare that, or
I would have to, as they have with the Pussy Church, I would have to basically establish a practice and a theology, and basically say that I have this theology and I share it with these other practitioners, and we would like to be recognized as being protected under a religious status.
Because my understanding is that Australia doesn't recognise religion as such, but recognise it as under sort of the charity.
Australia
a tax exemption charity or whatever it's called.
No. They own a ton of land and they're totally tax exempt. Australia likes to pretend it's secular and it's not.
Of course.
There's a Pussy Church now in Germany.
Yeah.
So they've established themselves there. So I suspect this is going to be one of those things where, and I actually have contacted the Pussy Church to find out if, how they went about getting their religious status. And basically they told me to join up, which I have, and I will try to get back on them and say, can you, do you have a online database where you can put together all of the legal documents that you put together to submit, that others of us could then use as a template and localizing them to where we live.
It would be amazing. It's unfortunate that we have to go to such great lengths to have women-only spaces, and that this is then also considered transphobic. But if that's our only recourse, what can you do?
Well, look, the first thing that's going to happen whenever women do anything for themselves is that men are going to complain.
Yes.
I mean, it's never not going to be seen as an attack on them. So you may as well get over that. You may as well get over.
I like that it's the few people have said, women have the right to assert their own boundaries, and it's going to upset people, but they're usually the ones that the boundaries should be put in place for.
Exactly.
If you're not upsetting the majority of men, you're not doing it right.
That's it.
Spot on.
It'd be interesting to follow that up, because how's everyone?
It is really good, because I want all the rights that you get legally, but I don't like the name Pussy. I want a different church with a different name.
Well, I don't think anybody would stop you. I don't think anybody's so wedded to the idea that if you did it yourself that it would have to have, any particular name. I like it. I think it's offensive, and intentionally so. And it's also, it's in your face. And I'm glad it is. I'm glad they didn't call it some sort of, women's, well, I don't wear it anymore, but I did have my Women's Sewing Circle and Terrorist Society t-shirt for a long time.
Nice. It's very clear what the church is, and I think it is clever using witch and pussy in its name.
Yeah.
Well, it had to use witch because it had to have an established religion.
Yes.
Getting that legal recognition was having something that was established historically.
Oh no, you're cutting out. Are you cutting out?
I can hear you.
I think only for you, Ash, maybe.
Okay, I can hear you.
What I said, it was just
well,
they had
apparently in Australia we have like
recognized
500,000 people who list their religion as Jedi or something. So, yeah, Australians can be very irreverent.
But it's cutting out for me. Is it cutting out for any?
What, Ash? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, can hear you.
Hello, Ash?
I'm just wondering how everyone's traveling, if we want to keep this going, or do you feel like it's we've gone a bit over time? It's only like 42 minutes.
What did you want? What was the limit that you guys were shooting for?
Oh, there isn't a limit, but
2 hours, huh? Wow.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
we're coming up on that.
Time
Like
flies.
this guy needs a bottle shortly, so I'm either way. I can grab a bottle and come back, or I can, I can wrap it up here.
Well, I believe we're having these live streams fairly regularly, so if I don't know, what do you think?
Well, I'm more than happy to get on them. Obviously, I'm very chatty myself.
No, I'm telling you, Laura.
But living in Tasmania, it's any form of speaking to someone who isn't your next door neighbor. It is, is a treat.
Well, it's brilliant. Yeah. Do you have any feminist groups? Does anybody belong to any feminist groups in real life on here?
No. Unfortunately, there are a few individuals who I know who are radical feminists that live down here, but they don't live particularly close to me. So we're not exactly getting together or anything like that, which is unfortunate. And I am somewhat housebound, unfortunately. So I do, it's easier if I can get somebody. Yeah, it was lovely chatting to you too. So if I can get I get a lot of online contact, and I have the occasional people who come to see me, that sort of thing.
Excellent. I think it's really important, these sorts of discussions, to hash it out, and we don't have to find solutions, but it's good to talk. I think we've lost some people here. Oh no.
There's Ash. Ash came back.
Oh
yeah, I closed it out and came back because everybody was cutting out. I don't know if that was just on my end, but I couldn't understand what people were saying.
Oh no.
That's the classic computer fix. Go out of it and get back into it. Yeah.
Well, perhaps we'll wrap it up, and I think the next one, if I'm right, is on a Thursday. Might even be this Thursday. I'll put it in the comments after we close out. But,
I also might do one right before I leave Japan on my last day, like maybe tomorrow early morning. It would be a little bit earlier than this. This is about noon time here. So that would be on not my channel, but the fireside chats, in case anyone doesn't know about it. But yeah, I because I'm not going to have a lot of time to talk to people when I'm on the road. So I'd like to do one more. And this is the first time I've spoken with, I'm sorry. Hello, my name's Witchy on the internet. But it's the first time I've spoken to Lori and whoever is hosting the Aussie Radfem channel at the moment. It's not S Valley today, so.
No. Yeah, I really appreciate everyone jumping on. It's been a really good discussion, and there's been comments going the whole time.
I just figured out how to open those, so you know.
Well, there's the chat within our chat, and there's the chat on YouTube as well. So there's been some good discussion in there too. And
it's nice to see your face, Lori. I've never done this where I could see somebody.
Well, yeah, this is me, and this is the Patty Mellon. Hi, I think his name's might going to be Louis, but I'm not sure. Does he look like a Louis? He's not.
Yeah, I can see Louis.
Anyways.
But, yeah, he's been quite famous. A few people have commented on how nice it is to have Australian animals in the feed.
Well, I have so many more questions to ask, but I guess I'll save.
No, go for it. Go for it. We can stay.
I was going to say, and if they're really interested in Australian animals, they can always come onto my Twitter feed, because that's pretty. I tell people either come for the cute animals and stay for the radical feminism, or they come for the radical feminism and stay for the cute animals.
Covering all your bases, Lori.
Yeah. An American expat, I am so fascinated by Australian wildlife, so I'm constantly finding out new things and getting involved in new projects. And I'm always sharing it with my Twitter followers, who are probably about, half of them in Europe and probably close to the other half in America. So, I love being able to share the wildlife from my adopted home.
Beautiful. Do you want to put your handle or your Twitter?
I just did. It's Ex Machina, and I just typed that in on the chat.
Yeah, and then I can
underscores, but you can get me without that.
Put it in the top chat if I've already had it copied. So
there we
go. Yeah. So anyway, people love to see all the cute things, and I love posting pictures of them. So.
Excellent.
Ash, what were your questions?
Yeah, well, I mean, I did you mention, Lori, that you considered yourself a lesbian separatist?
Yeah, no, I've been a lesbian separatist since the early 80s. I embrace that philosophy. I think that men are essentially black holes, and they just suck all the energy out of everything to get anywhere near. And I can and I can interact with them, but I choose to, center women in everything. And I've done Michigan the Women's Music Festival, including working on it. And I love that energy. I love female-only spaces and the energy that comes with that. I love not having to ever even remotely think about how some man is going to react to what I'm saying or doing. And, I've got, like I said, I've got acreage out here, and I keep joking to everybody that, they should come down here and we can build this, separatist enclave down in Tasmania.
Sure. Yes, let's do that.
All right.
So, it's just one of those things where I choose where my energy goes, and it goes to women. And when you're around men for any significant amount of time, it's impossible to opt out. There's not an opt-out option. And, and for me, it's just been much easier to have my life in such a way. I'm sorry, I have this patty under my chin. To structure my life in such a way that I just, I exclude men, and it makes me happy.
But you have to see men like when you go to the store or walk
down the street. Yeah. No, I'm not insane. I mean, the world is full of men. There's no way to avoid them. I have male doctors. There's no way to avoid that. But wherever I have a choice, I choose women, and it's it's a way of life, and I've been doing it for so long. It's no longer something that I even have to think of. It's just something that I do. And
that's interesting.
it's not man-hating, because, you know, men are irrelevant is what I tell people. And that's the one thing they cannot stand. You can love them or you can hate them, but you can't ignore them. You can't tell them that they have no significance whatsoever. And, you know, because it's an existential crisis for them. If women aren't there as the mirror reflecting them back twice the size to themselves, they don't exist, you know? And I just used to be that mirror.
Yeah, I used to think that in order to really do lesbian separatism, you really needed to be like off the grid, you know, like on a farm somewhere, like
I have
where
lived
literally you wouldn't see a man. But
yeah,
maybe that's not true. Maybe it's just like how you described.
It's an ideology. It's a way of living that doesn't necessarily include, you know, your own little enclave somewhere. And not that those are great. I've been to Oregon Women's Land, OWL, and stayed there. I've been to other separatist enclave and stayed there, and they're all great. And I totally appreciate the women who've put those things together and made them happen. But for me, again, it's more of an ideology. It's more of a way of life, as opposed to living in the middle of nowhere. And
do you have relationship with like male relatives, like brother or father?
No, I do not. And that's partially because I was raised in Orange County, California. I was raised in your classic evangelical, religious, Christian, right-wing nut jobs. Yeah, the whole thing, the whole package. And I don't deal with my family anymore because it was like throwing money down a well. It really was. Any emotional investment in them meant constantly being hurt by them. So I just made the decision not to have anything to do with my family anymore.
I think that's amazing, because I had narcissist parents, so I can relate to the throwing money down a well thing. But I see a lot of people who, you know, they aren't able to break it off like that. So that's really amazing. That
look, we're all our own circumstances. We all make the best decisions that we can within our circumstances as we understand them. Nobody says, oh, that's the wrong thing to do, and I'm going to do that. Everybody makes the best decision within the choices available to them as they understand them. And so I'm never having a go at anybody else by saying I choose this thing. I'm not to be held up as any example for anybody else's life. This is my life, and I'm making the choices that are available to me. But yeah, no, I don't. My land is fairly self-sustaining. I have solar hot water, I have solar energy, I have rainwater, I have composting toilet, I have patty melons, which are not the sustainable part. So yeah, I mean, I make the choice to make it so I'm not dependent on anything or anyone outside of myself, which is again ironic because I've lost a lot of my my physical mobility, and now I've become very dependent on getting other people to do things for me, and that's just it. That it is what it is. But I still have the knowledge. I still can fall back on my own abilities when I absolutely have to. And who knows how much longer that will be the case, but as long as it is, that is, you know, how I'll do things. I'd love to get some people out here, some women out here, not people, some women out here who'd be interested in, you know, learning how to live on the land, how to live lightly on the land, how to share, you know, your lives with nature. And yeah, it's just, it's a way of life for me. and it is part of my separatist belief system. But, you know, even if I was living in a townhome somewhere, I would still be a lesbian separatist.
Nice.
It's been said that that's sort of a natural progression of radical feminism. Do you think that's true, that as you live a more radical life, you have more of the theory in your life, and you turn your energy more towards women, that makes sense?
Well,
to
I forget who said something to the effect that feminism is the theory and lesbianism is the practice, but I don't, you know, if men weren't men, you know, you know what I'm saying? It's not. I don't object to them as individuals. I don't object to them as a sex. I don't object to them as anything other than the ideology of masculinity. And I can't do anything about that. I can't change men. Men have to want to change themselves, and they don't seem to want to.
No, I agree with you. I don't like when people are like, the XY chromosome is shady. Like, to me, that's not, you know, gender abolitionism. That's not our theory, you know, of gender as a social construction.
Yeah, well, look, I like I said, and I've often made the joke that it's not from the neck down, it's from the neck up. It's, yeah, their bodies are their bodies. I'm not drawn to them, but it's their thinking that really turns me off. You know, if that makes any sense.
That's funny. That's actually really funny. And makes a lot of sense. I guess we have a new person in here. I don't know how long you guys are going to be here, but I have to walk back down the hill to my friend's place. So, like, in between two places right now. I had left my headphones in my apartment, but it was nice to chat with everyone. And if you're not here when I get back to that place, then thanks for chatting.
Thank you for being on the call.
I'm glad you came in, Witchy. I saw you in the chat. I was like, oh, Witchy.
Yeah, cool.
I really would be interested. Are you on Twitter at all, or any place where?
I think you might be. I just followed you, so it's the same handle. And I don't use it that much. I'm more of a troll on Twitter. I'll do it like when I'm bored.
I am very
that's a good way to chat with people.
Yes, I'm very interested in what you're doing in terms of the documentary. And
yeah, I mean, it's going to be the first time I try to do that. I'm following a dream deferred. So
yeah,
that's excellent.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Well, I actually made some documentaries back in the day, and if you
nice, need some help, I'll reach out. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. I think there needs to be a lot more, you know, speaking of just my last thing here, like a female community, you know, like more interacting, like mentorship sort of things like that, where we can build a network and a group of women that have a lot of different interests, and we can ask each other, you know, how to approach certain things. So I'm all for it. All right, I'm gonna, if you're not on by the time I get back down the hill, nice chatting.
See you later, Witchy. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. I might have to go myself, so I might call it today. What do you think? And we'll there's a couple of these a week, so we can.
Can I say one last thing before we close?
Absolutely.
Because there was one moment where it cut out and I missed what you all were saying, and I wanted to say about the word pussy before. I just wanted to say, like, I'm not opposed to the group or anything. For me, it's like the same reason I don't like the word bitch or slut or something, because it's like, I feel like it's sort of derogatory toward women, and I don't like the whole like taking back the word thing, because I feel like that's what liberal feminists do with like the slut walk and all that. But I'm just saying that because I know that, you know, radical feminists are like welcoming of disagreements, and we don't censor each other like
look, it took me the longest time living in Australia to get used to the word cunt, which is literally here, and it's just not said in America. And every time I heard it, I flinched for the longest time. And I think that a lot of things just get into our system on that sort of atavistic level where we're not even, like I said, we react before we even, we hear it, and in that moment we react. And that's fine. I can deal with that. I can deal with people having limitations as to what they're willing to interrogate versus what they're just like, no, that's just going to be off limits for me. A lot of words, again, going back to linguistics, if you look at words that are exclusively female, you will find that a lot of them were not derogatory for the longest time. And by association with the female, they became derogatory. Or conversely, words that were derogatory but not gendered eventually became feminine. So there's this linguistic history of so many words that reflect how women are viewed in society. And the changes over the generations reflect, in a lot of ways, a growing sexism. Women used to be, there was that sort of separate but equal, I don't know if you realize, but there was that sort of separate sphere where there was the women's sphere, and that was the home, and that was the child rearing and that sort of stuff. And men basically stayed out of it. That was women's to do, and women were respected for their ability to do that. And that increasingly became more frivolous and just women's work sort of thing. Again, if just looking at words, if your last name is Brewer, that means your male line were beer brewers or some cider brewers, whatever. If your last name's Brewster, it was your female line, Weber, Webster. Essentially, there were families which took not the patronym, but the matronym, that if it was through your female line that your family had this vocation, it was recognized and it was validated, not just in the culture, but in the very last name your family took. And all of that changed over time. All of that changed so that it was totally patronyms. It was only you took your father's name. It was only men were recognized for what they did in the world. And words like pussy don't bother me because I know that, the words associated with anything female are going to be derogatory in some way. And
I'm reading Mary Daly right now, so I'm just started that. So I know she is already.
Which book are you reading?
Hag, and so I hear what you're saying.
Which book are you on?
I'm on chapter 1. I just started gynecology.
I love gynecology. That was like my first. I was like a little 20-year-old, and somebody handed me a copy of Mary Daly's Gynecology, and it changed my life. It really did. And for me, because I love words and the history of words, I love the Wikidary. So there's all sorts of, Barbara Walker's Encyclopedia of Women's Words and Symbols, that sort of stuff, looking at how historically women were viewed in the language and how that has changed over the years. To me is fascinating. Anyways, it's just one of the things I'm interested in. And links back to Kunti, which is a Asian women's religious cult. And yeah, so I mean, you know, when you start looking at these things, you realize that we had all these things. They were ours. They belonged to us. And men have taken them from us, and they've stripped not only the meaning from them, but they've imposed their own derogatory meanings on them. So I'm fine with words, whatever the words are.
I'm gonna reflect on that. Thank you for indulging me with that last little bit.
No, not at all. You can ask me anything, obviously.
I don't want to keep in anybody. I just, yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me discuss that.
I'll enjoy gynecology. Like I said, I really loved it. I still love it. Still have my copy.
It's like a poem.
It is. She's a wonderful writer. Absolutely gorgeous way with words. Hello, sweetheart.
Well, this was so cool. I just was at home on a Saturday night, not doing anything, and then I saw the Aussie Radfems were live, and I was so excited to call in.
Excellent. Thank you for everyone participating. That it's been a great discussion. We've gone for 2 hours, which is really good. I hope everyone watching on has enjoyed. There's been lots of chats in and outside of the live stream, so that's really good.
Well, and anything that gets 2 women together. I mean, 2 women together is a heresy happening.
That's true. And yes, everybody, if you can, try to organize in-person catch-ups. It's really important that we get together and have these conversations.
And if you want to come on down to Tassie, I have spare rooms. So
oh, sounds good. It sounds good, Laurie.
Lots of people come down to my place just to, you know, unwind, de-stress, sit on the porch with a book and a beer. Yeah, and that's all good. We're all up to that.
It's very beautiful down that way. If I'm ever in Tasmania, I'll say hi.
Definitely.
Well, we might wrap this up, and I must go. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. And
thank you.
There will be another one, if not from other people who are saying maybe tomorrow, then Thursday from us, I believe. So, but we'll post that up soon.
All right. Bye, women.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.